Okay, looks like we have a few people popping in already. There we go. We have, I'm going to give another 30 seconds before we get into the announcements, and we'll get the session underway with Kyle here. Okay, everybody have your coffee. Everybody have your water. Good to go. And 5 seconds. Sticklers for time, what we're doing. Cool. Okay, everyone. My name is Justin. I'm one of the organizers and volunteers with Startup Boston. You are in the session, How to Fix Your Broken Pricing Model with Kyle Poyar here. Just want to, thank everybody for being here. If this is your first session, welcome to Startup Boston. If you're logging back on, or if you're in the last session, welcome back. I hope you're enjoying so far. Just a quick shout out to the volunteers who all made this possible, to the speakers like Kyle who are being here. I wanted to go over a quick housekeeping, just list of housekeeping things for everybody who's on this session. First off, if you need to be in a different session, or if you want to kind of float back and forth between sessions, that's perfectly fine. Just go to Agenda. You can see the Agenda tab at the top of your screen, and when you click on that, you can see all of the sessions that are going on at the exact same time as this one, and you can also see some of the sessions that are coming up, so that'll help you plan your day. We love questions here. This is all about question and answers. We want to hear from you. So you'll notice on the top right, there's a Q&A tab. That can be your best friend. If you have any questions for Kyle, he's going to be able to see those questions and address them as we go along. The only other thing I'll say, this is the last thing, we have a contest going on. So everybody who's here right now, I encourage you to take down your favorite quotes from Kyle and then put them out on social media with the hashtag SBW2021, Startup Boston SBW 2021. If you do that, you'll be automatically entered to win one of 5 $100 gift cards to a local Black-owned Boston business. So that's a really cool contest that we have going on. And that's it for housekeeping. So I'm going to hand it over to our speaker, Kyle Poyar. Take it from here.
Thanks, Justin. Hi, everyone. Excited to talk about all things SaaS pricing. For way of context, I'm an operating partner at OpenView. We're a Boston-based VC firm investing exclusively in expansion stage software businesses. You might recognize some of our portfolio companies like Calendly, Expensify, Datadog, User Testing, JumpCloud are some household names. And I've been with OpenView nearly 6 years. In my role, I work hands-on with our portfolio CEOs and leadership teams around different strategic initiatives to unlock faster growth. And pricing and packaging is something that comes up time and again. Startups never have folks that are dedicated to working on pricing and packaging. They tend to not have people that have a whole lot of experience with it. And so it becomes something that is debated endlessly by the executive team, but there's not a whole lot of data-driven decision-making, and it's a lot of talk and not a lot of data-driven action. And so hopefully you'll take away some insights from this presentation around how to course correct. And the upside is that pricing has the most direct link to revenue of really anything you can change in a software business. And so the results of optimizing pricing really speak for themselves. And I will share my screen. All right, that didn't work quite as well. Let me share it this way. Looks like folks can see it. All right, I'll start going. So I used to give a version of this talk called Mastering SaaS Pricing, and the feedback that I got time and again was like, mastering SaaS pricing, we're just trying to fix our pricing. And the feedback was that, while founders might not have picked the pricing out of thin air, I think everyone agreed it was something that was not the most data-driven decision. It was a gut feel based on maybe a brainstorming session or two. There's a lot of room to improve it. And pricing should, in theory, be tied to the value of your specific product for your target customer. That's when it really works, really magically. but only 6% of SaaS companies say that their pricing model aligns perfectly with the value that their product delivers. And so there's a lot of opportunity, and you're not alone if you're thinking about, hey, our pricing is broken. And it's, you can initially hear pricing and think, oh, is this about raising prices 10, 15%, lowering prices? It could sound like a pretty tactical change. But really pricing, in my view, is part of finding product market fit. And we should even think of it as product market price fit. You want to find a product that serves such a strong need in the market that folks are willing to pay for it. And they're willing to pay enough for it that you can build an enduring business around that. So you can afford the sales and marketing costs to go acquire the customers that you want to acquire. And data from first round capital shows that pricing really can make or break a business. And so they compared founders who struggled to raise capital versus those who said raising capital was a piece of cake. And those who struggled were 3 times more likely to say they monetized too late, twice as likely to say they picked the wrong business model, and 40% more likely to say their burn rate was too high, which in many cases is because pricing has not been optimized. And so not only is there revenue growth opportunity, there's actually this is a really foundational kind of piece of building a successful startup company. And I alluded to this a bit. In my role, I get to work with tons and tons of companies around their pricing and packaging. I've worked with more than 20 companies in the OpenView portfolio on this topic. And then previously, I was at Simon Kucher, which is the world's leading pricing strategy consulting firm, where I work with dozens of companies on pricing and packaging strategy. And fun fact, I've actually priced everything from diapers to caskets. And so I do know pricing from cradle to grave. Probably shouldn't admit that. But I also just do a lot of research on this topic and how folks are approaching it. And so whether that's our State of SaaS Pricing Survey, where we've gotten over 1,000 folks to contribute, our usage-based pricing playbook, which we launched this year around new trends in software pricing, or the Mastering SaaS Pricing ebook, this is something I'm thinking about constantly. And when I reflect on all of that experience, these are the top 5 pricing mistakes that I see time and time again. And if you can correct these mistakes, you'll unlock tremendous opportunity for your business. So I'm going to go through these one by one, and we will have some time to kind of pause between each one. So if you have questions, I'll stop at each of those points and go through the questions that we have. Otherwise, we'll try to save plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So pricing mistake number 1 is that you're too cheap. And it's really easy to understand how this happens in a startup context. I mean, you're building a product, you want to get it in the hands of as many people as possible. You really don't want price to be a barrier of getting that customer feedback. And you as a cash-strapped startup, you're very price conscious when you're buying software tools for your business. But the reality is that most B2B buyers aren't that price sensitive, and you can use that to your advantage. And so when you think about selling to a mid-sized or large company, especially if you're selling to an executive there, they care a lot more about things like the ROI of the product, the predictability of the price point, whether they have confidence that that vendor is going to innovate and meet their needs. They're really sticking their neck out to make the case for buying software. And so it's about minimizing risk rather than optimizing for, a few $1,000s. And, most SaaS companies, when you look at it, take advantage of this and raise their price points pretty dramatically over time. And so from our software pricing survey, we were able to look at the typical price points charged by seed stage companies and then what happens over time as they grow. And the typical company increases prices by 60% as they move from seed stage to expansion stage, just like Series A, Series B, another 40% from expansion stage to growth stage, and then another 20% from growth stage to kind of that exit IPO stage, post 100 million in ARR. And so if you've gone a year, year and a half, 2 years without changing your price, you've probably left a lot of money on the table, is point number 1. It is something that you're not going to get perfectly, that you need to iterate. Think about pricing as you think about the product itself. It should get better and better over time. You should be adapting to customer feedback, where you are relative to competition, and use that data to make better decision making. And then when we study companies that have made pricing changes, we ask, hey, what was the impact of those pricing changes on your revenue growth? And as a side note, vast majority of pricing changes tend to be price increases rather than price decreases. And so when we survey companies, only 2% said that their pricing change hurt their ARR growth, which means 98% saw a revenue growth improvement from their pricing change. And the most popular was 10 to 24% increase, but a surprisingly large number of companies saw an even larger impact on revenue growth. And so when you think about, if you step back and think about the different levers you have to grow your business by an extra 25%, how many don't require additional headcount, are changes you can make pretty quickly, and don't necessarily even impact your margin. This improves your margin or your cost of acquisition. In fact, you might have a better CAC payback if you get a higher price point. It makes evaluating pricing kind of a no-brainer. And so if it's not on your roadmap, I highly recommend that you add it to your roadmap. And the pushback that a lot of folks have to this is that, what do I do with existing customers? Like, am I just going to be able to charge more to my customers? Like, aren't they going to push back? Aren't we going to get a lot of negative PR? Or are they not going to refer any of their contacts to us? I think that the first thing when you think about applying pricing changes to your existing customers is, validate your course of action and is that the right strategy? And so if you're in hyper growth mode, if you're doubling, tripling your customer count year over year, those early customers you had are going to be a smaller and smaller portion of your revenue base over time. And so you might not actually need to raise prices on them. And the bigger impact is going to come from your new customers. Think about it this way. If you're buying a product and you land on the pricing page, do you know how much you're going to expect to pay? No. Do you know how much that company charged last year? No, you don't. And so new customers have, you have a blank slate, an opportunity to tell the story around price that you want to tell. And it's not a pricing increase to new customers. It's just your price. But your existing customers have that that understanding. They have those expectations. They have budgets they set aside for your product. And so you might make a strategic decision that I think is very fair for many companies to not go raise prices on your existing customers. If you choose to, and so especially if you have a larger legacy customer base, you're not growing your new customers as fast, there can be a lot of revenue to unlock there. If you're going to do that, you want to first communicate why you're raising prices. So make sure you talk about all the value you've added since your last pricing change, what you're going to do with that, with the additional money that you're going to be able to generate. And folks are typically happy to pay more if they're seeing more value over time. Another thing is that you can use this as a marketing tactic. And so one thing I'll see many companies do successfully is they'll honor any existing quotes that they've put out to prospects for a month and say, hey, you've got a month to convert. Otherwise, you're going to have to be on the new pricing. You can also do that with renewal pricing. And so that's a great marketing tactic to drive urgency. And it allows you to, pull forward deals and not actually have to discount because the customer feels like they're getting a great deal. You're doing them a solid. Another thing is that you want to give customers a choice. In a lot of cases, folks hate feeling like they're strong armed, and that choice might be able to upgrade, get more features at a higher price point, or maybe keep their same price point but give up a few things. And that way, there's not necessarily a great option for them, and the preference is probably going to be the price increase, but they don't feel strong armed. And then finally, you probably are going to have some of your really early adopter customers who have had sweetheart deals, but who were design partners for you. Just be really mindful of them. Look at how your pricing changes would impact them, and just do what's right. You're also going to need an exceptions policy because no one ever migrates 100% of customers to new higher price points, and that's fine. That should not be your goal in the first place. And so pause here to see if there's questions. It looks like we had a question around advisable to test price increases on existing clients at renewal or on new clients. So kind of answered that, but one thing I would say is that it's a great idea to pilot pricing changes on new customers before applying them to existing customers. If you have a big enough sales team, you might give 1 or 2 reps the new pricing that they can start using in deals. I tend to do that with forward-thinking reps. And then you're not going to get, like a pure A/B test kind of result. You're not going to get statistical significance on what happens, but you'll kind of identify what the issues are. You'll identify any pushback you get from these customers. And if it works well and your reps are closing deals at larger deal sizes, you're going to get pull where all of your other reps are going to want to start selling that way. Another question here is, for a B2B startup, what are your thoughts on advertising your pricing on your website versus contact us for a quote? I will get to that later on. So yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah, look out for it shortly. And then there's another one about, we have a mix of D2C and B2B. The B2B pricing values work the same way with direct-to-customer pricing. I assume that direct-to-customer might mean more B2C pricing. I will also get to that. There are nuances. When you're selling more to end users or consumers, it is much more important to have things like freemium editions, free trials, the ability to start at a low price point. And so I will get to that as well. All right, well then I'll keep going. The pricing mistake number 2 is that you pick the wrong value metric. So first, what is a value metric? That's the unit of measure around how much you charge a given customer or how much they pay for your product. And historically in software, we've been accustomed to selling based on seats. And so that model has been around since early days, when it was like software was actually tied to your computer, your device. And it's still the most popular for many software companies. And so this data is showing how common different pricing models are. If you're a horizontal application, so where you sell to a kind of a broad base of customers, if you're a vertical application where you sell specifically to certain industries, or your infrastructure software where you sell more to developers or as kind of part of developer tooling, where folks build software on top of your software essentially. So user and seat-based models are still the norm in horizontal apps, but they've actually started becoming less popular in other models, as folks have found that a lot more creative and usage-based pricing metrics better align with the value that their products actually deliver for customers. And so if you're an infrastructure product, for example, so if you're an AWS, a Twilio, that kind of product, usage-based pricing is now overwhelmingly the most popular model. And I'll talk a little bit more why. So the first thing is just don't necessarily default to seats. Seats might be right for your business, but in many cases, they're increasingly less popular because they don't necessarily fit perfectly with what your product does. And when you think about what is the right value metric for your specific product, you want to look for something that helps you differentiate against competitors rather than just defaulting to what your competitors are doing, and helps you generate more revenue for the business. And I want to walk through an example to kind of clarify what this looks like. This example is BTS. They're a commercial real estate software platform. You can think of them as kind of like a CRM system, but for commercial real estate. They're an OpenView portfolio company. We invested in the Series B. They're now a unicorn. They're based in New York City. And when we first invested in BTS, they had a really simple pricing model. They charged per building that you wanted to manage through BTS. And this was really predictable for customers. They knew exactly how much it was going to cost. Really easy for reps to wrap their head around, and help kind of bring some really flagship buildings on the platform pretty quickly. But the problem, as you might think about this, is that it left a lot of money on the table. They were pricing the same whether you were managing the Empire State Building or a small suburban office building. But that's really different from how their customers made money on the product. And they got feedback from some that the pricing was a drop in the bucket, or really, when I interviewed folks, Some said, we don't know how VTS could be making money with the prices they charge us. We spend more in a day on maintenance than we spend in a year on VTS. But for other folks, we found that they maybe would bring half of their portfolio of buildings onto the platform, but not all of their portfolio, which limited the analytics that they could get. And so pricing was a barrier to customers fully adopting the product and seeing as much value as was possible. And so we knew pricing was broken, and we evaluated a bunch of different alternative ways of charging. Where VTS ultimately landed was charging per square foot. And so their price directly aligned with how their customers leased out buildings and made money. Customers charge per square foot. And so it was really easy to think about price in context. It actually made pricing look like a great deal, because you could be like, well, we lease it for this much a month. We're paying VTS this much a month. That seems like a no-brainer. It's kind of like insurance. It also was predictable for a customer. They know the size of their buildings, and it allowed folks to bring on all their buildings onto VTS, and they just didn't think about it. And so when VTS made this change, they actually saw a net pricing change of 70% higher price per square foot before and after, and they were able to bring on more square feet onto the platform, and they did not hurt their win rate with new customers. And so what I'd say is, when you look at a pricing model, this is a great way to be able to better align your price with the value your customers see and make a lot more money without necessarily feeling like a price increase directly. All right, and looks like there's no additional Q&A here, so I'll keep going, and I will get to the points in the existing Q&A. Pricing mistake number 3 is that you make it hard to buy. And so this gets to the B2C versus kind of B2B comment. Software buying has increasingly been evolving. And so we went from the world of kind of on-prem software sold to the CIO that lives in a data center, where you made a really large upfront purchase and that lasted years afterwards, to the cloud model, kind of that Salesforce era where you sold to the executive, you sold annual purchase, maybe with a multi-year agreement, increasingly moved from field sales to inside sales teams supported by marketing. And today we're in an era where increasingly the end user, that kind of consumer, is the first person, the kind of tip of the spear to find new software products. So whether it's adopting products like Calendly for scheduling automation, or Expensify for time track for expense reports, or Atlassian products, or Shopify, or Twilio, or you name it, increasingly software is showing up unannounced, even in large organizations. And the dynamic is that end users are finding it in the context of their workflow and their everyday pain points. They're adopting it, and then it sort of spreads often virally within an account before you ultimately bring in a salesperson to sell that executive buyer in a more of a B2B purchase. And so we call this an OpenView product-led growth. And so this means that you have to think about the end user and a B2C model in addition to your B2B model. And this has really important pricing implications. And I think Slack makes a great example of how this looks. And so with Slack, it's a widely used tool for kind of communication with coworkers. And the dynamic is that Slack often starts as just a kind of messaging tool for teams. So an individual will find it, start messaging other coworkers, and it goes from, over time, it goes from somewhere that is where kind of casual conversations are happening to all of a sudden a place where mission critical business information lives, and just kind of the hub of collaboration and accounts. And Slack has a super generous free edition where they kind of encourage that. They allow unlimited users to use Slack for free. They have a pretty robust free experience, but they have a cap on the messages that you can store in Slack, your message history. And so when Slack does go from that kind of communication tool for your B2C users to this mission critical business school where work is happening, that's when there's a paywall. It's after the folks have experienced value and you're able to unlock that kind of executive level budget for the product. So that's sort of the dynamic of pricing around product-led growth. And I'd say it's easy to dismiss this as, oh, this kind of works for Slack, this works for Zoom, this works for Calendly. Does this work for me as a product that sells to exclusively to other businesses or exclusively to enterprises? And what I'd say is that with the pandemic, and when it hit last year, I think many folks ended up realizing how important software was to power their lives. I think end users also started taking a lot more control over their IT kind of and tech stack environment. And so we saw this dynamic of end users as the kind of tip of the spear around software adoption just rapidly accelerate. And businesses tried to keep up. So we saw dozens and dozens of companies introduce freemium products and free trials for the first time to try to take advantage of this trend. Godaddy, for example, which is known as a web hosting company, founded like decades ago. They launched freemium as a small-scale experiment in spring of 2020. It was their first ever freemium edition, and it generated millions of new signups and higher than expected conversion. Meanwhile, JFrog, which is an enterprise-focused DevOps company selling to the Fortune 1000, they launched their free community offering in 2020, and this led to thousands of new registrations, and DevOps pros at their target customers would start using the product, sharing it with other folks internally, and then ultimately enter the sales pipeline. And so what I would advocate is, this kind of freemium free trial strategy is increasingly just an expectation in software buying. And so you need to think about that B2C user and not just that B2B executive buyer. That tends to lead to the question of, should I go freemium or free trial? I do have some data to share around that. So this is from OpenView's 2020 product benchmarks. And we looked at, for every 1,000 people that landed on the website of a company, what happened if they were a freemium business versus a free trial business. Freemium businesses saw more of those visitors end up signing up for the product, so more free users, but then a lower conversion from free to paid. Free trial saw the reverse. And so, one way to look at this is to say, hey, if your product gets more and more valuable over time, or there's a benefit to having more free users because of virality, collaboration, network effects, you name it, freemium is the way to go. But if not, free trial kind of creates more urgency and more conversion. You're left with fewer folks that are drained on resources and support. In my personal opinion, I'd love to do both. So I don't like to have to just choose. In my mind, the ideal model is to default someone to a kind of pro 14-day trial and then downgrade them to the basic free version if they don't convert. That's where you get the best of both worlds here. And that's the model of companies like Calendly in our portfolio, where folks kind of discover they're kind of surprised by all the capabilities that they could take advantage of, and they don't want to give those up when that trial expires. And it's more than just freemium and free trial though. And so one other example I'll leave you with here is Logical. They're an e-discovery software platform, again, an OpenView portfolio company. And they initially actually were a services business before transitioning to SaaS. And when we first invested in Logical, they were selling kind of exclusively on that traditional SaaS model. They had subscriptions with kind of large annual purchases, think 30, 40, 50K for enterprise legal teams or law firms. And this worked pretty well initially, generated the first couple million in revenue, but ultimately growth was slowing down. And for many of their customers, this is not how they wanted to purchase. Many of their customers wanted to, for example, bill back their e-discovery costs directly to their own clients. And so this large upfront subscription just didn't really work well for that dynamic. Where they didn't know what kind of amount of e-discovery they would need for the year. They didn't know what all their clients would look like, so they're very hesitant to make a big purchase. And so a lot of them turn to really expensive service providers rather than buying software. So with those insights, Logical decided to introduce a pay-as-you-go offering where someone could start for very little money and cancel at any time. And the number of new signups that they got went through the roof. I mean, this is really, we talk about hockey stick growth. This is truly hockey stick growth. because the way they were charging aligned with the way customers actually wanted to buy the product. And this also led to revenue growth as well. They raised their pretty sizable Series B directly on the back of introducing their pay-as-you-go offerings. All right, I'll pause for a second and see what other questions we have here. So we have a question from Dana around the best way to quickly and effectively understand the features that customers would consider premium and worth paying more for. I will actually get to that in the next section. Another question around what pricing strategy you recommend for a B2C startup like a marketplace with online bookings for events/parties, where taking a % of the transaction seems more transparent to the vendors and they only pay as they use, but also forces them to take transactions offline as they see it cutting into their margins. That's a great question. And I totally kind of get this challenge from a marketplace standpoint. I'd say I don't have a one-size-fits-all recommendation, but my personal preference tends to be trying to find a way to be so valuable that customers want to stay on the platform and facilitate their transactions through you, whether that's handling payment processing, having all of the data live on your system. There can be a lot of benefits to buying through the platform. And so my take would be try to make a transaction model work, but make sure that you have enough value as part of that experience that folks are encouraged to put transactions through your platform. That's sort of best case scenario. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily work for every business. The other thing is that we did have that question around thoughts on advertising pricing on your website versus contact us for a quote. And so I'll address that here too, because it kind of comes into this ability to land new customers. My opinion, if you are selling in this product-led growth model where you're reaching that B2C or that end user, it is an expectation that you have something transparent on your website. The other thing that I've seen is that companies that have a starting price point less than $10,000 a year or about $1,000 a month tend to default towards price transparency. Those that have larger starting price points tend to default to not being transparent. When you're kind of on the fence, my default is to actually be more transparent. And I do that, I think that for a few reasons. One is that your customers are doing more and more research on you online before they ever get in touch. And one of the most important things that they care about is figuring out, if they can afford your product and how much to budget for it. And if they're not able to find that information on your site, they're going to go try to find it on someone else's site. And so you want to be the one to own it. I also think the market is moving towards more transparency, whether you look at the success of companies like Vendor, which are kind of disrupting the SaaS buying process, and they actually creating a database of the prices of SaaS products themselves, or other factors. The market is headed towards transparency. And so you can either be ahead of that trend or be the kind of victim of that trend. And the final thing I'd say is that Atlassian is kind of one of the leaders in pricing transparency. And because they're so transparent with pricing, many of their customers just see that as the price is the price. Like there's no ability to discount. And so the more transparent you are, the more folks just expect that that's how your pricing works. And so you might end up realizing that you need less negotiations, less of a discounting model, and folks have a lot more confidence in the price point when it's published. Although one kind of con to be mindful of, if you're still testing your pricing a lot and have not fine-tuned the model, or if you don't have simplified pricing, there's a lot of complexity there. You're not at a good point where you want to publish it yet, because customers need to be able to digest it and they need to be able to have confidence that it's going to be kind of consistent for at least the near future. And so make sure you do that work to simplify and to test the pricing before making it transparent. All right, so point number 4 is that your upsell path is broken. This is the expand part of the land and expand business model. And in software, you used to think of 100% net dollar retention as the gold standard, because that meant you had net negative churn as a business. When we looked at the software IPOs from really the last 3 years up until this year, the median company that IPO'd had 120% net dollar retention. And so 120% net retention is now the new standard rather than 100%. And what this essentially means is that for every $100 you get from a batch of new customers, that turns into $120 at the end of the year, even after accounting for churn. And so you need to be able to rapidly expand the amount of money that your customers are paying you over time. And there are two ways of doing that. One is feature packaging. So the kind of packages and products that you sell to customers, what's in a higher tier edition, for example, or as an add-on. And then usage-based pricing. So we'll tackle the first one, and this gets to Dana's question around best way to test features that might be a premium. So the first thing to think about is what's the kind of archetype of packages that you want to have. And this is showing from most simple, which is an all-in package, one offer with everything included, that classic Bloomberg terminal model, to the most complicated, which is the Twilio model, extremely modular, build your own packages, like dozens and dozens of SKUs, but extremely flexible for the customer to build what they want. I tend to default to good, better, best, and it's the most popular for a reason. It balances simplicity with still having flexibility and choice for the customer. You can communicate a kind of low and affordable entry price point, and then charge more and more as customers mature in their sophistication or just their requirements. And so good, better, best, in my opinion, is best. And then you start thinking about what features should be in that good package versus what are the premium ones that should be in better or best, or maybe even an add-on. My mental model tends to be, I think about the McDonald's value meal. And so when you go to McDonald's, you're going to want that kind of main meal. You want the burger, chicken nuggets in my case, but you might have the fries, you might have soda, but those are more fillers. And so what McDonald's said is we want to actually bundle that burger with the fries and soda into a value meal to be able to sell more. And so when you think about packages, you could think about like good, it's really just the burger. Better is the burger with fries and soda, and then best is that, but as a supersize. And so they're packaging the filler product with their leader product in order to drive cross-sell and upsell. And what you notice though is that they're not bundling the apple pie or coffee. And that's because, not because these products have no value, but they're valuable at a different occasion to a different person. And if they threw too much of that in a bundle, people would be feeling like they're paying for things that they don't need. And so you don't want to be packaging up these killer products where they're much more polarizing. So the thing I look at is I will interview folks or survey them depending on how many customers you have, and walk through different product features that you have and ask them to tell you for each of them, is it a must-have, a nice-to-have, or something they don't need? And then take all the things that they selected as must-have and have them allocate 100 points across each of them based on where there's the most value. And when you look at that across enough folks, you'll be able to really rank order the value of your features and see which ones have wide appeal where everyone wants them, but they maybe are low value, or everyone wants them and they're really high value, which are your leaders, your hamburgers, or they're things that maybe are polarizing, where only a few people need them, but those people really need them. And those are great things to sell as add-ons. So that's the research methodology I use, and it's great also for testing new features that you're thinking about building rather than just existing products. All right, continuing on here, so that's feature packaging. The other side is usage-based pricing. In my opinion, this is even more powerful of an expansion route than feature packaging. And when you look at these companies that have IPO'd, 7 of the 9 with the highest net retention rates, and we'll particularly call out the top 3 of Snowflake, JFrog, and Fastly, all have usage-based pricing. And this is where expansion is sort of built in as your customers adopt more of the product over time. And so not only do they monetize these customers increasingly over time, but it's like an organic expansion rather than having to go in and sell that customer more stuff. And I want to share an example of a local company in Boston and how they approach usage-based pricing, because I think it's a great story and one that that many folks might not be as familiar with. So when HubSpot started, and up for a number of years of the business, this is what their pricing looked like. They had just good, better, best packages. You could see they had a certain number of user seats included, and it was $3,000 a year, $12,000 a year, and $18,000 a year. And this worked pretty well. It helped them land a lot of new customers, but churn rates were high, and there wasn't that much expansion. Especially, it's kind of challenging to expand with this model. And so their net retention rates were abysmal. They were closer to 75%, which was not setting them up on a trajectory to go public. And so HubSpot completely rethought this model, and they kept this concept of good, better, best editions, but they launched a notion of contact-based pricing, where customers pay more as they generate more marketing contacts. And they have a certain number included in their package, but they'll pay more as they grow. And this really aligns well with how their customers saw value, because their customers are trying to use HubSpot to generate more contacts. The more contacts they generate, the more they can market to these folks and the more they can sell. And so it's a win-win. And within a couple of years after launching this model, they were able to improve their net retention from 75% to 100%, which set them on that path to a successful IPO. And so usage-based models, even incorporating product usage in creative ways, is really the most powerful way of driving expansion with your customers. All right. So going back to the Q&A here, there's another question about, for B2B, is using both freemium and free trials the best way? I think I covered that. I love that hybrid, and you can look at Calendly and at Airtable as two examples. Another question here about what will be an effective pricing model for credit cards issued to price-sensitive small business owners. I think this might be one that is maybe best answered offline, because I think it's kind of specific to this particular individual. And so if you want to follow up with me on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out with your question, and we'll see what we can do. All right, so last pricing mistake here is that your pricing is static. And when you think about the changes that a company goes through, they start off with a fairly simple product. They probably just have one product, fairly simple pricing. They start to add a lot more products and features over time to both deepen their product market fit and expand into new markets. They start looking at product tiers and add-ons. Then when they get to the growth stage, there's a lot more target customers where they need more segmented pricing or differentiated pricing. They have a lot more people on their team, so the way they execute pricing in the field becomes more important. And with all of their products, they start to try to simplify with packages and bundles. And then even later stage, they look more at international opportunities or churn mitigation opportunities. And so as your company evolves, pricing needs to evolve with it, or you're going to be left behind. But the challenge is that most folks don't take this work seriously. And so when I've asked folks, have you done pricing research or have you done price testing? The majority of people have done neither. And if they've done it, it's just been some cursory work. But when you do some of this research, specifically surveys or interviews with customers, you get golden nuggets of insight that can really change your business. And so this is one of those quotes I got in interviewing a customer of ETS's. And so the customer said, the price is not material enough to be a factor in the decision. It's not even a blip on the radar. And so this is part of what gave them a lot more confidence in moving forward with that new pricing model. And when it comes to doing pricing research, there's a lot of different ways to ask about pricing or learn about pricing models. And so when I look here, there's both direct research methods and then indirect methods where you tease out price, but it's kind of set up with other factors. And there's a question here from Francis. Can you give an example of how you would reach out to customers to do this research? So great question. And so first off, if you're selling more to kind of mid to large companies, to that executive kind of persona, I tend to set it up as interviews. Otherwise, I tend to do online surveys. And with interviews, I reach out more as a kind of a feedback conversation. It's great to understand their decision about purchasing you in the first place. And so that's a natural time to ask about pricing and kind of how you came in versus competitors. But then also kind of feedback around products and their overall experience with you. So that allows you to test the value of different features, including new feature ideas and price as well. I don't like to position them as pricing interviews themselves. That puts the customer off on kind of the wrong foot and maybe starts to kind of game their answers. So just treat it as more open-ended needs and feedback conversations. You might even also think about incorporating pricing questions in your kind of typical product interviews with customers as part of validating the opportunity for new products. And so then when you're in these environments, there are a lot of different ways to ask about pricing. One of my favorite that's just an easy thing to do is the Sven-Westendorp method. And so this is after you've uncovered what their ideal set of features are, you then say, okay, for this, you imagine we were able to offer all these things. What price point would you think was a bargain? And then wait for the price. And then at what price point would it be starting to get expensive, so that you have to think before buying it? And then at what price point would it be too expensive, prohibitively expensive? And when you ask those questions, you learn the customer's mental model around how they think about price points. You might learn psychological thresholds in folks' minds that you really want to stay under, and it really helps with positioning your pricing. And so this is one I recommend looking up. It's a great question to start adding. And then the other question is kind of who should own this work. So I tend to recommend having a cross-functional working group that meets and kind of discusses pricing, but you need to have someone that facilitates that. And currently most companies don't have anyone. So 55% say no one owns pricing, 36% say it's a piece of someone's responsibilities, and then only 9% have a dedicated resource for pricing. This tends to happen when companies are approaching more 50 million in ARR and above. And you could make the case for this to be living in marketing. It's one of the P's of marketing, in product, in finance, in sales, and ops. And there's different kind of pros and cons around all the above. My personal view is that product marketing is a great place for pricing if you have a strategic product marketing function, because they're really trying to understand customer value, positioning. They're also great at managing cross-functional initiatives. But otherwise, if you are more of a kind of self-service and user-focused model where you're doing a lot of kind of high volume acquisition, marketing is a great owner. But if you're also a very innovative company that's releasing a lot of new products all the time, product is a great owner for pricing. So it really varies depending on your objectives and what your organization looks like. My main takeaway is having someone own pricing is more important than who exactly owns it, and make sure it's a cross-functional effort. It's a team sport. And so these are the 5 takeaways. Don't play too cheap with B2B audiences. Spend the time to think about the right value metric that helps you differentiate and sell more. Don't just default to seats. Sell to customers the way they want to buy. Increasingly, this means product-led growth and starting with that end user with freemium products and free trials to drive initial adoption. Usage-based pricing and feature packaging drives that really healthy net negative churn that folks are looking for. And then experiment and iterate on pricing. Don't just set it and forget it. And so thanks for paying attention. I'll go through some of these other questions here, and you can add me on LinkedIn or follow me. I put out a lot of kind of content and advice around pricing and just broader SaaS growth. And then I'd also just plug, I've got a newsletter on Substack called Growth Unhinged, and you can find that at kylepoyer.substack.com if you're interested. It's free. And so let's get into some questions. And so we've answered this question around market research. Another question here from Angela is around, have you had any experience with SaaS pricing in the construction industry? The industry is starting to open up to technology, and wondering if you have seen a successful case for it. It's a good question there. I mean, I've seen software increasingly reaching kind of all verticals. Construction is no exception. Whether it's construction, manufacturing, healthcare, services businesses with the ServiceTitan of the world. Traditional blue collar industries have been left behind by software products and are increasingly open to it. I think that on the construction side, I don't really have any other advice other than kind of following these general principles. You might look to Procore as an example, and Procore kind of talked a lot about their pricing model in their S1 as they were preparing to go public. One of the things that they realized is that construction is a very collaborative industry where there's a lot of different players that might benefit from being on the same workflow. And so Procore does not charge based on user seats because they want to allow folks to be able to share Procore with other partners, so contractors, subcontractors, and all of the different players involved. And then those folks can become people that could become buyers for your product as well. And so that's a great kind of healthy way of driving virality and kind of word of mouth adoption. And so my only advice would be look for ways to kind of take advantage of that collaboration and virality to grow the business. Another question here from Laura is that I'm a mission-driven product selling to B2B and B2C. Is there a mission-driven selling strategy? How do I respectfully sell my product without sounding as a negative company, saying other companies are selling fake products? So this is more of a, this is more of a product-based sale as opposed to a kind of software product here. I think that the key thing that I kind of have realized with pricing is that pricing is it's a story, and it's a decision that you get to make as a business, and it's also a story that you have to tell your customers. So it has to align with how you position the product, how you talk about who you are and what you do, and it really needs to reinforce that broader message. And so I would make sure that the story you're telling around pricing really fits with that broader value proposition. And so if you're doing things that are more sustainable, that are higher quality, and you have that kind of mission orientation, make sure that people also sort of think of that as part of the experience that they're paying for, and that's the way that you can capture that higher price point. And it also will make people feel good about paying more for it, by the way. Let's see, looking through here, we have, we'll take one more question here. So let's assume a company successfully A/B tested a new pricing model, which will bring in more revenue for the company. This is going to make a majority of early companies unhappy as they were enjoying the broken pricing model. How do you introduce it to all customers without disrupting the bottom line? Well, I think the first thing is launch initially with your existing customers, with your new customers, because you're going to start being able to generate more money from those cohorts. And so you don't want to let that existing customer base block that ability to start making more money. So that's step number one. Step number two is that you want to probably look at a customer by customer impact. So for all of your customers, how much do they pay today? What would they pay in the new model? And you're probably going to find a bunch of them would pay a pretty similar amount. Some might even pay less. And then some are going to pay a small amount more, and some are going to pay a lot more. And then you might want to even add a layer of what's their product engagement? How happy have they been? Have they, what are they at risk of churn? And you don't necessarily want to raise price by 2x for a company at a churn risk. And so that's going to help you just have an understanding of that context for an account. And what I would probably do is set some parameters around how you want to approach pricing. So if someone's going to see above a 50% price increase, maybe you stair step them or give them, or kind of let them stay at a more legacy rate, or maybe give them more product for that same price point. Whereas other folks, you might be able to just migrate them as is. And then you're just going to have to start probably at renewal. So you don't necessarily need to change everyone's price point all at once. You can do it when people's contracts are going up for renewal. That also kind of makes it so that you're recognizing that additional revenue over the next year. You can really hone the talk track and see what the results are with your first couple of cohorts. You're going to learn a lot on how to communicate it with your customers, what objections they have and what exceptions you might need to make, or what the churn risk is. And if you have a really sticky product that people are seeing a lot of value in, and you have a good case for changing the model, and it works in that A/B test, you can have the confidence to be aggressive. It's just when you're aggressive, make sure you're communicating what's in it for that customer. So why is this model in their best interest? How are you going to help them, for example? And what are all the things that you're investing in to drive a better experience? Cool. Well, I think that that about covers it. Thanks everyone for paying attention.
All right, I'll take it from here, Kyle. Thank you so much for really sharing a lot of incredible insight there, and to everybody who's here in the session, a huge thank you. I mean, the engagement was incredible. The questions are amazing. I hope everybody feels like they were able to get their questions addressed. If not, obviously get in touch with Kyle, get in touch with us. The session, I saw a few questions about the session recording. That will be recorded. We expect to be able to make the session recordings available in November and December, so you can catch up and remind yourself a lot of the great lessons here. Just to go back to some of those housekeeping items, if you click on that agenda tab at the top, you can see the other sessions going on at the same time. You can see the sessions that are happening next, see if there's anything that feels right for you, and if you want to set aside some time to join. And then if there are any really good quotes from Kyle that you held on to, just one more reminder, you can put those out on social media with the hashtag SBW2021, and you'll be entered to win one of 5 $100 gift cards to a local Black-owned Boston business. So we'll leave you with a few extra minutes to get some coffee and get yourself ready for the next session, or go on to whatever else you have going on for the day. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Kyle. And I hope everybody enjoys the week.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everyone.